From the land of 10,000 lakes and just as many heartaches, welcome to the 301 Show. We're here to celebrate, commiserate, and maybe, just maybe, see a Minnesota team win it all. Whether you're dreaming of a Vikings Super Bowl, reliving the glory days of the Twins, or still recovering from the Timberwolves roller coaster, we've got you covered. This is the 301 Show, where the North remembers and the passion never fades.
Yes, welcome back to the 301 Show. This is the second episode. Today we've got a good one for you. We've got some wild talkers, some preseason roster cuts that have happened recently. We've got what I want to see in their lineups, which likely won't happen, at least to start the year, likely won't happen. Might happen at some point this season, but will not happen to start the year. We will have some talks about the Minnesota Frost as they start their second season. And we've got another talker about the absolute collapse of the Twins and the awful press conference that took place technically right before game 162. And if you didn't hear about that press conference, there is a reason for that, and we will get into that. But we've got that for the Twins. For the Timberwolves, obviously we've got the massive trade that went down, kind of unexpected, but expected at the same time. We'll get more into that a little bit. And then the Vikings are playing an early game on Sunday in New York. So we will go, not in New York, against the New York Jets in London overseas. So we'll go over that and look at where they stack up so far this year. So yeah, that is a look forward. Let's dive right into it. All right, so first, let's talk about the Wild. They made some roster cuts a few days ago. Some I kind of agree with, and some I was a couple guys I was hoping to see up here, and I think maybe up here at some point this season. But the forwards that were, I should say, cut from the Wild team, it's not the same as cuts from in the NHL are not the same as cuts in the NFL. They are still on the under control for the Wild, but they are just being sent down to the AHL. So that the forwards being Caden Banker, Travis Boyd, Brendan Gauntz, Devin Shore, and Riley Height. So the middle three of them, Travis, Braden, and Devin, are having to clear waivers before they go to Iowa. And then Riley Height, who I was really excited to see. He looked great this offseason, but he is younger, so he was sent down to back to juniors in Canada, with the WHL Prince George Cougars, where he looks like he has a very bright future. I don't know if you guys saw that quote that Bill Guerin said about him, where Bill Guerin's quote was basically he has Riley Height has a little FU to his game, which I completely agree with. Obviously, the guy who is watching him practice every day is going to know way better about these players than I ever will. But just from the little bit that I have seen him play in the preseason here and in some of the training camp videos that the Wild have released, he looks like one of those like kind of gritty skill players. Like he is not afraid to go into the dirty area. I kind of compare him almost to a Jared Spurgeon, where Spurgeon's only like 5'8", 5'9" on a good day, but he was not afraid to go into those corners against those 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" players and come away with the puck. I see a lot of that in Riley Height, where he is He's got a lot of skill, offensive skill, but he's also willing to go to those dirty areas and battle for the puck so the Wild as a team can control the puck, and obviously he wants to score himself, so he wants to keep control of the puck as well. Then the three defensemen that got sent down were Carson Lambos, Ryan O'Rourke, and David Spacek, which I was really disappointed to see Lambos get sent down. I know he was probably going to, but I am a huge fan of Carson Lambos. I think he has a future in the NHL. Um, and yeah, I was a little bit disappointed to see him get sent down. Again, I understand why they do kind of have a logjam in their as their at their defenseman positions, with a lot of kind of younger guys, like some older guys too, like Brodeen, Spurgeon. They've got the rookie of the year runner up in Brock Faber, who just signed a massive extension this offseason. It was the largest extension the Wild have ever given out. So obviously he's not gonna overtake guys like that just yet. But I was hoping he would have made like a um, bottom pairing defenseman. Um, but yeah, and then they also sent down Samuel Holovak. Sorry, I'm very bad with those European names. Um, the goalie Samuel, we'll call him. I don't want to keep butchering his name, but that was also very much expected because they have the tough decision is what they do with Wallstedt and Gustafson. And I said last week what I want to see in that decision. I want to see the two goalies this year be Fleury and Wallstedt, and then you can go trade for Gustafson or trade Gustafson to a team, which we will get into that a little bit more here later. But yeah, those were the guys sent down that brought the preseason training camp roster from 39 down to 30. They've got a couple more cuts here to make. That they got to get down to 23. You got 20 players suited up for every game, and then 3 healthy scratches every night. So you got to get down to that 23 number. So they still have a few more cuts to go, but and I will say these last couple cuts here are the hardest ones to make because I will say I want to see every guy they're going to cut that looks like they're going to cut and send down. I want to see them in the NHL. And the guys that they're going to keep in the NHL, there's a couple guys that they're going to keep in the NHL that I wish were not on the team, in all honesty. But I will talk about that here in just a second. We will get into my personal ideal lineups. Um, and yeah, let's actually do that right now. So this is what I want to see, and this is assuming that everybody is healthy. Um, like I know that Matt Boldy is not fully healthy right now, but for this exercise's sake, I will be assuming that he is fully healthy right now. So my top line, I've got Marco Rossi centering Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Zuccarello as my top line. Now, I'd like to get some more second line talent so you can move Matt Boldy up to the first line because I would love to see Matt Boldy play alongside Marco Rossi and Kirill Kaprizov. But right now, I want to split up that Kaprizov and Boldy talent a little bit to even out the lines talent wise a little bit, and then you can always change them mid game or during the before a game or something like that. So my second line, I hinted at it just there. I've got Matt Boldy on the wing with that Taranen that they signed this offseason. And then those two are centered by Joel Eriksson Ek. I think Rossi and Ek are the two best centers on this team, but I don't think those two are going to be the top two centers. I don't think that's what the Wild will do. I think they are going to go Rossi on the third. They're basically going to flip flop my first line center and third line center on opening night. I think that's what they have said that they're going to do. So they have already confirmed this, but it is a little disappointing to see these two guys not be the top two centers. But the third line, I have Marcus Foligno centered, Marcus Foligno on one wing and Marcus Johansson on the other wing, centered by Ryan Hartman. So I think that can't remember if this was John Hines or Bill Guerin, but one of the two of them said that they are going to start the season with the top line being Kaprizov, Hartman, and Zuccarello. So that would move, in my mind, that would move Rossi down to the third line. But in my mind, he is way too good of a center to be playing on the third line. So I believe that for the Wild to actually succeed, you need to have that embrace the youth, embrace the younger talent that is already up here or borderline, like straddling the border between Iowa and Minnesota. And that comes to our fourth line. I've got Lauko on the wing, Kustadinov in the center, and then this is my bold take for a guy that's actually going to make the team. I don't think he will make the team, at least to start the year, but I think he will be first man up from Iowa when there are inevitably injuries this year. Because again, the injury bug is real. So each team will have a few players injured. I do think that Liam Ogren will be the first forward up from Iowa to Minnesota. So I do really want to see him get some significant playing time here in Minnesota to prove that he is an NHL caliber player. Because I do think he is an NHL caliber player. He just needs to have some actual NHL game time to prove it. And then, okay, we'll move on to the defenseman here. The top pairing, I think the top four defensemen are for sure the top four defensemen. I think the only debate for the top four defensemen is who they play with and technically which pairing they're on. But the way I have it set up, I think this is a very clear top pairing and then a very clear second pairing. So my top pair is Brodin and Faber playing together. I think Faber will, take those chances that like a Matt Dumba would take offensively, but Faber, he is able to get back and recover way better. Even just in his rookie year, he was able to recover better than Matt Dumba ever was. And if he's playing with Brodin is a very solid defenseman on the defensive side of the puck too. Like you get guys in the league like an Erik Karlsson who will put up 90 to 100 points for you and can do it semi-regularly. I should say Ottawa Senators Erik Karlsson before he got traded to the Sharks. He was putting up those just insane numbers for a defenseman, insane numbers for any player, but especially for a defenseman points wise. But he was more of a liability defensively than I would like as a defenseman. But yeah, I just think Brodin is able to have a very sound um, defensive game that I don't think he gets enough credit for throughout the NHL. And then my bottom pair defenseman, there's really three guys in my mind that could be in this bottom pair. I think that is those three guys are Declan Chisholm, Damian Hunt, and Zach Bogosian. For this one, for what I want to see, I put Chisholm and Hunt as my two guys that I want to see on that bottom pair. I would not mind seeing Bogosian in there. I pick any two of those three. Um, but the one guy I left off of this list on purpose was John Merrill. I think he, unless there is like significant injuries to the defensive core, I think he should be watching from the press box, eating popcorn with Bill Guerin every game. So if all seven of those defensemen that I mentioned, or at least six of the seven, are healthy, I don't think John Merrill should be playing. And then as for my goalies, I mentioned it earlier. I think it should be Jesper Wallstedt starting and Marc-Andre Fleury as the backup. Fleury for sure will be the backup this year. I don't think there's any question about that. I don't think that Wallstedt will start as the starter. He may go down to Iowa for a little bit of time, but I know this speculation was thrown out by, I can't remember which person it was, but it was one of the guys on Judd's Hockey Show threw out, why don't you trade Philip Gustafson for picks? You're not going to get the player that obviously wants out, but you're not going to get him in this trade. But why don't you trade Philip Gustafson for picks to the Boston Bruins? And then you have a goalie that is under contract for 2 years, 2 more years. This year and next year. And then you can negotiate better with Jeremy Swayman. And obviously the Wild are not going to get Jeremy Swayman back for Philip Gustafson. They would have to throw in way more, and you're sending a message to your young goalie, we don't trust you yet, and they would have to pay him too, which they don't have the money for that because of the Parisi and Suter buyouts. So there's a million reasons to not get Jeremy Swayman back from the Bruins, but sending Gustafson to the Bruins might not be that bad of an idea. But if I had to go put money down, my official bet would be Gustafson and Fleury start the season in Minnesota. Wallstedt goes back for one last year in Iowa. And either some point this year or next year, starting the year, Wallstedt is the starter here. So, yeah, that is what I have for the Wild. Let's quickly move on to the newly named Minnesota Frost. So I want to go over, I'm going to do a little bit like we talked about last week with the NBA and NHL. I want to go over their standings, and then I want to go over team awards. If it was only Minnesota Frost players that could win the league awards, who would it be? And I took out Coach of the Year because they only have one head coach, and the head coach is going to win it. So, General Manager of the Year, they only have one general manager. And I know there's the controversies with the dismissals of those two. I'm not going to be getting into that here. I feel like people have talked about it enough. can find that other places. That's also taken place months ago at this point. So I will just go over the standings, my standings predictions, and I will go over the team awards. So to start off, let's do the standings, and I will go from, there's only 6 teams, and there's no conferences, so they just go 1 to 6. I will go from 6 to 1, work my way from last to first. So at number 6, I have the Ottawa Charge. Last year at their trade deadline, they got rid of, I forget what her last name is, but Lexi is her first name. She was one of their best. They traded her to Boston, and she was one of their best players. So I think they're going to step back. They're going to tank again, basically, for the first overall pick, um, and build for the future. I don't think they're quite there yet. Number 5, I've got the Montreal Victory. Again, I think they're going to take a step back from the last year. They were the number 3 seed and actually played against. Excuse me, no, they weren't the ones that played. They were the 2 seed and they got knocked out in the first round by the Boston Fleet. So I think they are going to not make the playoffs this year. They will get the 5 seed. Now, number 4, I think, will making the playoffs for the first time in franchise history is the New York Sirens. I'm not 100% sure why I feel this way. I just have a gut feeling at this point. I think New York is going to make the playoffs this year. Number 3, I have the Minnesota Frost coming in at number 3. I think after the international games, they did not look like the same team. So I think they are going to try to just play more evenly throughout the entire year and maybe not have as high of a high, but also then not have as low of a low, and try to wrap up a playoff spot before the last game of the season. Number 2, I have who the Frost beat in the championship last year, the Boston Fleet at number 2. Again, I think with that Hillary Knight, I think that they are still just as good of a team as they were last year. And then number 1 I still have the Toronto Scepters with Sarah Nurse. I don't know how they don't get the 1 seed this year. So on to the Frost Team Awards. The Billie Jean King MVP Award, I have Grace Zumwinkle. I think she's going to have a massive year this year. For me, it was between her and Taylor Heisey. I think the 2 of them are the 2 best forwards on the team. So I just chose Zumwinkle as the choice there. Forward of the year, I also chose Grace Zumwinkle. I think if she wins the team MVP award, how can you not give her the Forward of the Year award? Defender of the year, I think I've taken a massive step forward this year. I've got Maggie Flaherty. And goaltender of the year, again, flip of a coin on who gets this one. Both of them are fantastic goalies. But for this one, I went with my favorite of the 2 goalies, Maddie Rooney. And then rookie of the year, I went with their first round pick, Claire Thompson. All right, now let's move on to the Timberwolves here, who have just a massive storyline. Massive news going on here. The Cat trade that happened late on Friday night at like 9 p.m. So the New York Knicks receive Karl Anthony Towns. The Wolves receive Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, and a 2025 first round pick from the Detroit Pistons that is top 13 projected. So they, knowing the Detroit Pistons this year, they are probably not gonna. That's probably not gonna be a first round pick. But with Randall and DiVincenzo, I do like this trade. So I will say, Cat is the reason I got into the NBA and just Timberwolves basketball specifically. I was more of a hockey, baseball, and football guy before Cat. And so it's going to be weird not seeing him in a Timberwolves uniform. So I do think that Cat, means a lot to me for that reason. But over the last 9 years since he was drafted, I fell more in love with the team than I did 32. So I became more of a fan of the Timberwolves than I did Carl. And I do think that this trade is going to help the Timberwolves. And I do hear people saying that it's basically like the Polads where Glenn Taylor is a cheap owner. That is not true. The Timberwolves still have the second highest payroll in the entire NBA this season, this upcoming season, the 24-25 season. So that was after the Cat trade happened. So they didn't trade Cat because they wanted to shed salary for this season. They traded Cat because here's what his salary is over the next four years. So 24-25 this season, he is making $49.2 million. In 25-26, he is making $53.1 million. In 26-27, he's making $57 million. And in 27-28, he's making $61 million. It's to me, it's similar to the Vikings getting rid of Kirk Cousins. Carl was not good enough to be getting paid that much money and would also lead the team to a championship. They would not have been able to put together a good enough roster around Cat to actually contend for a championship with Cat making that much money. And one of the things that they said was they would both Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Naz Reid are both free agents next season or next offseason. Next summer of 2025, those two are free agents. They would not have been able to keep both of them if they kept Cat on the team. And with his salary jumping up $4 million from this upcoming season to next season, that contract was going to be a lot harder to trade next year than it was this year. But I've also heard, I think Shams reported it on the Pat McAfee show, where I could be wrong about that. Maybe I saw it from Twitter or something, but I think it was Shams that reported that the Knicks offered the Timberwolves a deal that involved Cat going to New York that the Timberwolves were okay accepting. But the Knicks had made it so well known that they wanted Carl that they said no to it. And then the Knicks offered it to him again. They said no again. And that happened like 2 or 3 times where they were okay with the offer, but it was the exact same offer every time before the Knicks said, all right, Randall and DiVincenzo. And they're like, all right, now we're getting somewhere. The Timberwolves are saying we're getting closer. And they basically played hardball to then get a first round pick out of that too. So if that is true, I don't know 100% if it is true or not, but if that is true, Tim Connolly absolutely fleeced the New York Knicks. If that part is true, yes, then that was a fleecing. Another reason I do like this cat trade is at media day, Ant admitted that they were both trying to be the team's one. They were trying to share the ball basically and be like a 1A, 1B. If you look at the teams that have won championships here in the last 10 years, and the teams that have won multiple championships in the last 10 years, you look at the Golden State Warriors, who won 4 since, let's go back to 2010 to now. So last 15 years. The Warriors have won 4. And yes, they had, Klay Thompson. They had, Draymond Green was insanely good there when they were won 3 out of 4. They had Kevin Durant for 2 of those rings, but there was no doubt whose team that was. That was Steph Curry's team. Steph Curry was the guy on that team. And if you look at that Miami Heat team with the Big 3, yes, they were known as the Big 3. But there is no doubt whose team that was. That was LeBron James's team. You look at last year with Jason Tatum and Marcus Smart. They won the championship. That was Jason Tatum's team. So I think if the Timberwolves are serious about winning a championship, it was a good thing that they gave the team to Ant. They gave the keys of the car to Ant. This is Ant's team now. I would rather have this be Ant's team than Cat's team at this point. And we saw 9 years of what it was like when it was Cat's team. It was Cat's team for a while there. And until last season they won like it seemed like 4 playoff games, didn't win a series. They've won 4 series in the team's history. And 2 of those came last year, and then 2 of them came the year Kevin Garnett led them to the Western Conference Finals. And by the way, that Timberwolves team back in 03-04, that was Kevin Garnett's team. So to have success, you have to have in the NBA, you have to have the one player where you can point to them. Yes, it is that player. It is that player's team. Now, the Timberwolves can do that. You can point to one player on the Timberwolves roster right now and say, it's his team. It's Ant's team. All right. Now, let's turn to maybe the worst PR nightmare since the Vikings taking the Love Boats out on Lake Minnetonka. The Twins finished with a final record of 82-80, so 2 games above 500. They, yeah, not good. They, I just want to break down a couple of time periods here for you. So from March 28th, which was opening day, to April 21st, so almost a month, the Twins went 7-13. They had a couple rain delays in there, or rain postponements and then just normal scheduled off day. So I will say it did seem like it was hard to get a consistent feeling in that, but still, you start off 7-13. You're at a 1/3 winning percentage at that point. Then from April 22nd to August 19th. So the just the majority of the season, but right in the middle of the season. When you think baseball, you think these months. They went 64-40. They were 24 games over 500 in that time span. And then on August 18th to September 29th, the Twins won 11 games and lost 27. So 16 games under 500. That absolutely cannot happen if you want to be a contender. If you actually want to be not just make the playoffs, but if you actually want to win a World Series, which should be the goal for the Twins. It should be a goal for every single team. Now, you're not realistically, you're not going to win a championship every single year. You know, the Timberwolves the last couple years, not, going into the season, they were not expecting to win a championship in any of those years. You might have adjusted your expectations last year, but going into the season, you can take steps forward. It'd be great if they did win a championship, but you can take steps forward with the younger guys. The Twins, make the playoffs last year. They break the 18-game losing streak in the playoffs. They finally win a playoff series for the first time since 2004. Things are looking up. And then, before free agency even starts, the Pohlads announced they are cutting payroll by $30 million because they can't get a deal done with Bally. Now, that should just not be an excuse for it. I get it. Sports are a business. I understand. I understand that. But these sports teams should be run differently than a normal business. They should be. Like you are not especially a baseball team. There is no salary cap in baseball. Most teams are losing money, especially with how how much older the fan base is of baseball. The baseball does not have a young fan base. So you should be, trying to go out and sign another starting pitcher. Re-sign Sonny Gray last offseason. Or go get a number 2 behind Pablo Lopez. Now, I know Bailey Ober took a massive step forward this year, but you were not expecting that out of him last offseason. And Joe Ryan got hurt this year, a couple months left in the year. That's going to happen too. You can expect that something like that to happen to your starting rotation. Go out and do something in the offseason, or at the very least, do something at the trade deadline, which they also didn't do anything at the trade deadline. Well, technically, they did one thing where they got a reliever who was sent down to AAA 2 weeks later. That's not enough. Now, the Joe Pohlad had a press conference, and yes, he did have a press conference, but you're not to blame if you didn't know that he had one, because he decided to hold the press conference on September 29th at around 12:30 p.m., 1 p.m. Now, if that date and time sounds significant, that was this past Sunday at 12:31 p.m. I wonder what was going on at that time on that day. Maybe, the Vikings were playing the Packers at Lambeau Field. Like, they were clearly embarrassed about their, Joe Pollard was embarrassed about his decision making for this season, how this season went. And now he's trying to cover it up. It's embarrassing. That's embarrassing. So he holds a press conference when he didn't think anybody was watching it, and nobody was. So there's one quote and then another point that was made during the press conference that I want to bring up right now. The quote is, he said, "But that's just the reality of my world. I have a business to run, and it comes with tough decisions. And that's what I had to do. I wouldn't make any other decision because that's the position we're in. That's our reality." So Joe Polad is basically telling fans, we need to make money on this. We don't care about winning a championship. All we care about is, lining our own pockets. That's so frustrating to hear as a fan who was born in the late 90s that hasn't seen one of these four teams win a championship in my lifetime. Like, I love these four teams. Yes, we have seen the Lynx win a championship, and we've seen multiple championships. They were a dynasty. We've seen the Lynx win multiple championships, and we've seen the new Frost when they won the first one last year. That's great. That's fantastic. I want to see one of the men's teams win a championship here. They haven't done that since 1991. That if they can't win a championship until 2025 now. If the Vikings win a championship, that will be in 2025. So they have gone from 91 to at least 2024 without winning a championship. That's 33 years without winning a championship. That's embarrassing. There's 14 markets in this country that have at least one team in all four major sports leagues. There's 14. Arizona is second in how recently their last championship was. Their last championship came in 2001. Minnesota is the only market in this country that has not won a major men's championship in the 21st century. That is so embarrassing. Like, I am sick of just letting these teams off and like being okay with just mediocrity. Like, I don't want to just be like, every single year I'm okay with maybe squeaking into the playoffs and let's hope we can win one. It seems like that was the Vikings mentality. Like, before KOC and Kwesi took over. Like, the Zimmer Spielman era was just let us in. Just let us in to the dance and maybe we can win one. That should be your attitude if you're the Texans last year, or you're the Baltimore Orioles now, where you have a young team. And you're like, well, we're trying to get just some playoff experience for these young players. And the playoff experience is what's more important than winning the championship. Now, obviously, it's great if your team can go on then and win the championship that year. That's fantastic. if the Texans or the Orioles this year, I know the Orioles are already out of the playoffs, but if they had won a championship, that would be fantastic for them. But Minnesota just hasn't done that. And that's such a bad mentality to have when you have it for 10 years straight like the Wild did. That it's ridiculous. I'm fed up with this. So the other main talking point I want to talk about real quick before we move on to the Vikings. And we'll talk about the Vikings and Jets game this upcoming Sunday. Joe Polad did say the payroll will not go down. The payroll will not be slashed again this year. Which, if you look at it at just the surface, that's great. That's fantastic. But when you dive a little bit deeper into it, Carlos Correa's contract goes up by $4 million from this year to next year. Pablo Lopez is getting paid $13.5 million more this year than last year. Yes, you're getting guys like Max Kepler and Kyle Farmer off the books. But the money that is saving is going towards these guys that are contracts are, their AAV is going up. So you don't actually have any extra money. You're just, that extra money is going to these other players. And what's even more scary is these following guys are arbitration eligible. And these are guys that I think they should either bring back or at least give a very hard, long look to getting back. Royce Lewis, Willie Castro, Ryan Jeffers, Johan Duran, Griffin Jacks, Bailey Ober, Joe Ryan, Trevor Larnach, and Alex Kirilloff. Now, of that list, I think Alex Kirilloff is probably the one that is the most expendable. But those guys are like the cornerstones of your team. Those are the guys that were your best players all year. That when they're on the field, I know Lewis had injury issues. Joe Ryan was down for the last 2 months. Kirilloff was hurt too. So take those three guys out: Castro, Jeffers, Duran, Jacks, Ober, and Larnach. Those are the guys that were actually like performing decently. Like they were your best performers when the rest of the team sucked. Like Griffin Jacks was your best reliever all year. Willie Castro was your most consistent hitter all year. Not to mention he played what seemed like every single position. Those are the guys I want to bring back. So then you can't really go out and get any more free agency if the payroll's staying the same, and these guys are getting probably more money than they were getting last year, these arbitration eligible guys. So that is why I'm frustrated with the Minnesota Twins. We will now transition into something a little bit more positive, the Minnesota Vikings. All right, the Minnesota Vikings. They're playing this Sunday, October 6th at 8:30 Central Time. They were playing at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Fantastic over there in London, England. So this is kind of a revenge game for both starting quarterbacks here. So we got Aaron Rodgers, who was, in the NFC North for his entire career up until last season, which I don't know if last season really counts because he only played 4 snaps. So, and then Sam Darnold is going against the team that drafted him, who he was seeing ghosts playing for. And I think as we look with Aaron Rodgers, what Aaron Rodgers is doing this year for the Jets, I don't think it's the quarterback's problem with the Jets. I think it's an organizational problem. And like Kevin O'Connell said, it's not the quarterback. The quarterback doesn't fail a franchise. the franchise fails the quarterback. So I think that, both of these teams or both of these quarterbacks are, their unsuccess with the Jets so far with Rodgers, but then his career with the Jets so far. Darnold's entire career with the Jets. I don't think it was either one of their faults, the quarterback's faults. I think it was the Jets' faults. So, yeah, each quarterback, I think, is going to want to get revenge on the team that they are playing. So I just want to go over some quarterback comparisons here. So Aaron Rodgers so far this year is throwing at a 64.1% completion rate. He's gone for 849 passing yards. So that's 6.6 yards per attempt. He's got 5 passing touchdowns to 1 interception. And he has a quarterback rating, which is not just passing. It takes into account rushing ability. It takes into account the entire quarterback's play. Aaron Rodgers it is on a scale from, I think, 0 to 100. So Aaron Rodgers is sitting at a 50.1 QBR, so right in the middle. Sam Darnold, on the other hand, is 68.9% completion. He's got a 392 passing yards, 8.8 yards per attempt. He's got 11 passing touchdowns to 3 interceptions. And that is good for a 73.5 QBR. So the Vikings do have the quarterback advantage here, at least this based off of the numbers we are seeing this season. We will see how that actually goes, because I do think this is probably the 2 best defenses that have gone up against each other, at least for the Vikings this season. The Jets do have a very good defense with Hassan Reddick. I think he's playing. I'm not 100%. I should probably have checked that before. But then they also have, their secondary is also very good, led by Sauce Gardner. So Sam Darnold may struggle this game, but I think with Rodgers, being 40 years old, coming off an Achilles tear, and he wasn't like super mobile in the first one, like more mobile than statue Kirk Cousins, but not like a Lamar mobile quarterback. I don't think he's going to be able to move super well in the game. So if the Vikings can rush blitz like they have been so far this year, I think they can at least hold the Jets offense to a low scoring game, and then that'll all just be up to the offense then to just score more points. I did look through the last 5 matchups that these two teams have played against each other. So the last 5 matchups were in 2022, 2018, 2014, 2010, and 2006. And the Vikings lost in 2010 and 2006, and then they won in 14, 18, and 22. So they are on a 3-game winning streak. That 2022 matchup was in December. That was KOC's first year with the Vikings. That was the 13-4 season with 11-0 on 1-score games, except for the playoff game to the Giants. It was the first 1-score loss they had all year. But the 27-22 was one of those 11 1-score wins that they got. So they are looking to keep that winning streak going this year. Their season rankings so far this year, they're on offense. They are sitting at 340.75 yards per game. That's total yards rushing and passing. That is good for 10th in the entire NFL. They are at 29 points per game. That is good for 4th in the entire NFL. They are converting on 3rd down 43.5% of the time. They are 20 for 46. That's good for ninth in the NFL. And they've gone for fourth down 3 times, and they have gotten it twice. That is good for tied for seventh. So again, fourth down, they haven't really gone for it all too much, but they are a top, based off of those numbers, they are a top 10 offense in the entire league. Defensively, yards per game, they are giving up 349.3 yards per game. That is 23rd in the entire NFL. Points per game, they are 14.8 points per game. That is good for fourth in the entire NFL. So, as you can see, as long as they are able to, they may give up a bunch of yards, but they are consistently getting stops when it matters. So this right here, offenses against the Vikings defense on third down are 17 for 54. That is a 31.5% conversion rate. That is ninth in the entire NFL. That is ninth lowest. So you want on these conversion rates, you want it to be low because that means the offense is not converting these third downs. And obviously you want that when your defense is out there. On fourth down, teams have gone for it 12 times. They have succeeded 4 of those 12 times. That is 33%, and that is 7th in the entire NFL. So again, on third and fourth down, and when you have the chance to score, the Vikings defense is standing tall. The Brian Flores-led defense is able to get stops when it matters. When it matters the most, they are getting stops. And I sang the praise of Will the Thrill last time. He remains perfect so far. I'm going to knock on wood again. He is 6 for 6 on field goals. The 58-yarder against Houston a couple games ago, not this last week, but the week before, that 58-yarder is still his longest. And on extra points, he is 14 for 14, so still 100%. He has not missed a field goal or an extra point so far. Let's hope he can keep that going in London. But again, I said this last week. This is the first time in a while that I am not scared. I don't know if I trust Will Reichert fully yet because he is a rookie and kickers are human. I mean, look at Justin Tucker this year. Justin Tucker's coming down on the other side of the age hump, but I don't fully trust him yet. But this is again the first time in a long time I am not terrified to see a kicker running out on the field. I'm not after Blair Walsh, after his missed kick, I was terrified whenever he would go out there. I got to be terrified when Greg Joseph would run out there. I guess the only guy I wasn't super scared when he would run out there, but again, more scared than Reichert was the 1 year of Kai Forbath, the miracle year. But again, this kid I am trusting at the kicker position more than I have in any kicker in recent history. So that is Will Reichert. And the Vikings do improve to 21-0 when winning, or when I should say not losing the turnover battle under KOC. They're 21-0 when they either tie or win the turnover battle. So, yeah, that is good news for the Vikings. Let's see if their defense can, stand strong again, maybe get a couple turnovers. And the offense has just got to hold on to the ball, which it seems like it is doing more this year than last year. So, yeah, I do thank you for tuning in again this week. Sorry this was a couple days late, but I do thank you for tuning in, and hopefully we will see you back here next week too.